Alright, I want to take a few minutes and talk to you about thumbnail sketches and how they're an important tool for any artist to use. Thumbnail sketches are also simply referred to as thumbnails, are small, quick drawings meant to work out your composition and visualize the final image. They usually contain little to no detail, although I've seen more than a few examples that contradict this. Because they're small, you should be able to make several drawings in a pretty short amount of time. But they aren't tiny. I mean, they're not called fingernail sketches. Anyway, thumbnail, fingernail. Anyway, so they're pretty small. They're meant to work out your composition by establishing a picture plane. So an important part of the thumbnail sketch is, in fact, establishing this picture plane. You're not just starting a sketch in the middle of your page. This is really necessary for you to establish the space in your drawing. And you really can't work out your composition and design elements without understanding the space that everything's existing in. So even as much as an important part of it, of your drawing process, this is, still students want to overlook it or skip right past it. So now the picture plane itself can be virtually any size, shape, orientation. You can see that I made a number of rectangles on here. I think rectangles or standard sizes are the best to work through because they'll give you more options and some cheaper options for framing once you finish your drawing. So standard sizes being like 9 by 12, 11 by 14, 12 by 16, 16 by 20. Those are things that you're going to find if you're, at a regular art store like Michael's, craft store, something like that. So while I don't mean to stifle your creativity, work in squares, work in circles if you want to. This does make the whole process a little bit easier, throughout the whole thing. So now, before you even start your thumbnails, I got a little bit of a head start on mine. It's good to try and think ahead of how large you want your final to be, because that can really help, determine what your orientation is right at the beginning, or these sizes right at the beginning, the proportions. So I've got a page right here of, thumbnails using scale and proportion, and they're all rectangles, just a little bit different in proportion. So you can see that I've got ones that are a little bit like this first rectangle here, because I'm going to try and work towards a 12 by 16 orientation or composition, final image size. And, in order to get the accurate proportion, you just need to divide these numbers and kind of work down towards some smaller sizes. So this actual rectangle is 1.5 by 2 inches. And if I multiply this by 8, if I multiply these numbers by 8, it'll eventually work up to 12 by 16. And I could have done the same thing with this next one, which is to a 9 by 12 finish size, image size, but for some reason 1 by 1/8 by, or 1 1/8 by 1.5 seemed just a little bit too small. And, I don't work well with having my thumbnail image too small right at the beginning. It starts to feel kind of cramped. Anyway, so this is a page that's going to be available on our Brightspace class page. Put that off to the side. All right, so now I've got, I got started on one image here. Ideally, I'll be working from life for the rest of these. I just happen to be in my home studio right now, and this is an image that I took from the drawing studio at FLCC. So I thought, I'll just, work from this little small image, not a whole lot of detail. It'll keep me from getting too obsessed in some of the really fine little detail things that I know are there. So getting started with some of the placement, you can see that things are not detailed at all, and in this I will not use any shading, especially since in our first assignment it is a contour line drawing, so there's just going to be no shading at all. As I work out some of these things, this is the first one. I don't mind it very much. I'll need for you guys to do at least 8 thumbnail sketches for each drawing assignment of varying orientations, vertical, horizontal, and then once you've decided on an image that you really like that you're going to go with, you'll just star that. So I can tell which image you're going to be working off of. Okay, so now going back to the thumbnail proportions, some of the benefits of using thumbnail sketches. One, it helps to clarify your vision of your final image. I mean, you might think that you have a good idea for a sketch, but you don't really know until you get it down on paper. I mean, it might not work at all, but it might be just what you hoped it would be. So that's one of the best reasons. Number 2, you can explore and work with different compositions than what you usually do. Now, this is, you don't want to get into a rut. Everyone's got a specific aesthetic style that you like to work with. I tend to be maybe a little bit more minimalistic in my approach. And so you don't want to necessarily do the same thing all the time. Now, that's not to be confused with developing a style, particular approach to your artwork. I mean, that's something that every artist is really striving for. So that's not exactly the same thing. But there are times that I'll just kind of go off standard sizes and maybe do something that's really long and like a landscape kind of seascape. Those tend to be long and thin horizontally. So, giving yourself a couple of different ideas, that's really helpful. Another reason for doing thumbnail sketches is that your first idea is rarely your best idea. So I know everyone thinks that the first idea, or you just start and work from there. I know there are some artists that do that, but I think that to really have a lot of success with that is a lot more uncommon. So working through these images, every idea, even good ideas, can be improved upon. And, I've unfortunately learned the hard way, had to make major late stage edits to pieces because, it shifted one object over too far, all sorts of different reasons, but usually it was because I was in a hurry or didn't plan things out quite right, quite as effectively as I could have. All right, so let's see. Now, I will say that making thumbnail sketches doesn't ensure that you'll end up with a great composition for your final image, but it can really help. And I've seen students that maybe aren't the best at drawing skills aren't quite what you want them to be yet, like that just spending some time with composition, that ends up being really important. Having a good composition, even if your drawing skills aren't entirely there yet, I think that goes a long way. And I think that can really make up for maybe some lacking drawing skills. In the same way, you can have really great drawing skills and then have kind of a mediocre composition. And, we want to have a great image, design planned out with good proportions and really nice crisp lines and all those things that make a great drawing a great drawing. So as I work through this, it's a good idea to make notes as you go. That's again, it's like people that are wanting to skip this whole step of thumbnails are probably also going to want to skip making notes, but I might want to come back to something like, I've got this is a little book here that skull is resting on. This is really close to this edge right here, and I think that doesn't make for the best indication of space. It really flattens this out a little bit too much, so I might, make a little arrow, like say too close to edge. And I otherwise actually really like this composition, but I'll have to adjust that, and I might end up doing another drawing where all of these objects are placed just a little bit higher, so that gives me a little bit more room in the foreground here at the bottom edge. So too close to edge. That'll just kind of help me be aware of that aspect. Let's see, something like this. I've got the skull coming down in through here. That book. Try and get my proportions as accurate as possible. I mean, it's really important to be flexible at this stage because it's just a little sketch. It's not life and death. I feel like a lot of students will start out with being really afraid to make corrections or erase, although at this stage, like, I'm not really erasing much at all. Definitely not shading. I might shade later on if I'm working on maybe the rendered shading assignment, which is in a couple weeks down to the semester. But, trying to kind of lay out objects and get a sense for some placement. So, all right, this one's not horrible. I'm not crazy about where that handle falls for that little sugar bowl, that kind of Art Deco sugar bowl right there. Let's see. Well, all right, so I've got some verticals. Maybe I'll try a horizontal. Maybe I'll try this big old pine cone over and through here. I like that little lantern. I would love to be able to get that and in with the rest of those, and I might not work. Anyway, let's see. Oh, actually, I am going to erase one little thing, and I'll show you. This is just to kind of move my eye up into the image. So let's see. Sugar bowl. All right, that pine cone, I think I wanted it a little bit further over. We'll try this one. And I'm not worried at all about those details. Deal with that later. When it comes to actually working on the thumbnail, or no, not the thumbnail, I'm sorry, the contour line drawing, I think it's a good idea to have, a mixture of organic and man-made objects. I talked about this, or I will talk about this, I'm not sure about the timing, in a video on setting things up for a still life. But I think that it's a good idea to have a variety of textures and objects, and to have some objects with a bit more complexity. It is, something like a big old pine cone like that is pretty intimidating, especially if maybe you don't have a lot of experience with drawing, or you haven't been drawing in a while, or maybe you are a good drawer and you still feel kind of nervous about a shape like that. But it adds a ton of visual interest when you can put objects that are, much more detailed. Now, I don't recommend trying to draw this whole image. I mean, you could. It's going to kind of cut down on the amount of detail that you can really effectively include, because I'm a big fan of detail. Let's see, I'm gonna make a few adjustments there. I don't know what I see back there. I just think I can see the back side of that bottle. I think the teeth go down a little bit further there. You see that cavity, sinus cavity of the deer skull. Now, something that I think is a really good idea, especially in this first drawing, is to have a composition that engages all four sides of the picture plane. So I said this is the picture plane, this is that kind of window or frame that we view our final image through. And if I've got a drawing that I zoom in on, then I've got lines that engage or touch all four sides of my picture plane. Actually crop that one a little bit more. Here I am using my eraser when I said that I wasn't. Let's see, and then this kind of wooden cup. Cast shadows. I like to put in cast shadows whenever possible, even at a kind of a simple image like this, just because it gives a little bit more context and I'll be able to see that. Oh, totally screwed that up. All right, so those two things are going to get scooted over there a little bit more, and the edge of that is a little bit further over. I don't really mind though for right now. It's another book down there. All right, that one's kind of interesting. It's got a really subtle diagonal moving through. I like that. Not too much negative space. There's a good balance. There's kind of this repetition of form between the eye and these, I think that they're maybe an egg and a marble and I said that Japanese lantern. So that's kind of interesting. I don't mind that at all. I might want to move, I'm going to try this again and move everything down. Maybe I could do one with a ton more negative space, and like so far I've included the bottom edge of this book a whole bunch. Maybe I'll start again by like really cropping most of that out, half of it out. I can try that and see what that gets me. Skull. This is a question. Do I have that skull run off the edge? Yes or no? Now I'm putting these things in mostly to just indicate some space and make sure I've got my proportions right. All right, let's see. I like the way that one looks. That one's kind of nice. But I don't want to take up too much time having to watch me draw. I know a little bit helps, but too much starts to get kind of boring. Oh, that box is actually a little bit taller, so I'll bring that up a little bit more there. A little bit of that edge back there. Now I think that when you're doing thumbnails, it's a good idea to be doing a whole bunch of different variations, different compositions on one still life setup, as opposed to, you know, drawing 8 separate images of completely different objects. Like, you can do that, but I don't think that that's a really effective way to get a sense of, you know, what composition is going to work the best. So I would recommend, even if you want to try a couple of different setups, which, you know, I will usually have 3 or 4 setups, still life setup in the drawing studio, and students can kind of hop around and take a look at some different things. You're going to find that, you know, maybe you don't love some objects that you thought you were going to, or, you know, I don't know, whatever reason. But it is a good idea to give yourself an opportunity to explore one image in a bunch of different ways, as opposed to trying to do 8 completely different images. Okay, so I'll leave you off with that. Thumbnail sketches, super important tool for any artist to use. The planning stages of the final image, Do not neglect them. You will be required to do these for each project we do. Like I said, a minimum of 8, and star the one that you like the best.